Okay. It's mainly for me and you, and if anyone shows up, they show up. I don't give a shit.
Exactly.
Oh, let me I'll plug it on Counterpoint's Discord real quick.
Cool. And then it already automatically went to Twitter, so that'll be good.
Oh, I'll just get it through Twitter then. I was like, how am I gonna look this up real quick? I don't remember. Crowdsource politics. That's what it is. There it is.
Do you have a preferred way to pronounce your name, or how do you go by
you can call me Joe.
Joe? Okay.
You just call me Joe.
We haven't had much interaction, but I think I sat on a panel with you once or twice.
Yeah, I think it was one or two times. Whenever you seemed reasonable, so I'm like, that'll probably be fun.
We'll try. We try.
All right, I'll link down my Counterpoint's Discord. Are you on that? I should probably invite you over there.
I am not. But I really don't use Discord. I mean, I use Discord, but not really.
No.
But yeah, go ahead and invite me on that because I didn't know he was running a Discord.
Yeah, it's the reason I'd say to come on it is because he'll talk to pretty much anybody. So
yeah, we've had
increase your reach or whatever.
Oh yeah. We've had conversations. He was on a podcast, like a legit podcast with me, a couple weeks ago, talking about like police reform and shit like that.
I think the last time I had a conversation on his channel was about defund the police. I was like, tell you what, I'm not gonna be a pussy about this. I'm gonna come out and just say we need to eat their funds. That's it. I'll defend the hard position. I don't care. And I got you. It was fun though.
That's fair. I am curious about something. Where is it? Here it is.
Because, in my opinion, there's an argument to be made there. I don't think most of the people make it. I gotta fix this camera later. It's like I'm just staring off to the side because there's a camera in front of me, but it's not the camera that I'm using. Hold on, let's see. Yeah, fuck it. This thing's just gonna fall again. I'm gonna fix it later. It's okay. If I don't make eye contact, it's nothing personal. It's because I'm looking at the screen.
Okay, no worries. I'm gonna turn off my professional stuff here. No, I can't turn off the professional stuff. What do I need to turn off? Actually,
let me recap these notes real quick.
Unlock that. Can I just shrink this down? Do I want to do that? Fuck this. All right. Oops. Whatever. Studio. We'll be getting started here. Anybody that's actually watching here in a second. I just need to rearrange some shit so that it doesn't look like crap. Basically, I just need to turn off the follow. Actually, I just need to move this.
Let's see if I can turn this other light off. Give me a second too.
Do that. That'll work. And then, no, wait. I know what to do.
I just got one of those Aero Garden things. I finally just set it up, and it has this giant bright LED light, like the Aero Garden, little hydroponic little garden system. So it just grows lettuce. Yeah. So I have lettuce to put on stuff. Yeah, it's kind of nice. I was like, I really just wanted basil, but now I have 4 different types of lettuce. So I'm like, all right, whatever, fuck it, who cares?
It's nice. There we go. Let's see here. I know what I gotta do. I gotta shrink this down, actually. Turn the professional back on. Wait, why is... Oh, did it... Why did it go like that? That's fine. This is why I shouldn't have gone live yet. Wait, why isn't it showing? This is strange. The fuck? All right, whatever. I ain't gonna worry about it.
It looks beautiful. Don't you worry.
Well, on the stream, I don't have my professional stuff showing for some reason, and is it because of this? Is this why? Oh, that's why. Oh. I see. I actually have both running. That's why. You know
Yeah.
what? We'll do it that way.
Yeah, on Black Friday I bought like the streamer shit. Like, oh, I got these stupid colorful LED lights. So I'm just like, I don't even know where to fucking put these up. And some of my other equipment, like one of fancy like the circular light things or whatever. I guess not fancy, but it's like I improved the lighting situation a little bit.
Nice. I just use a green screen because I'm lazy.
I was pretty sure there's a green screen behind you.
Yeah, I can't. Oops. I can't actually face my wall with all the stuff that's actually behind me because I have a corner desk and my wife's part of the office is on the other end, and so it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I'm like, I just got rid of a roommate, so I'm like debating, like, should I just turn that into like a studio or studio/guest room, or should I just get another roommate? I don't know.
Nah, that makes sense. All right.
It's like, how much should I care about? $700 more a month.
Gotcha. All right, we'll do that. That'll work. All right, everybody. Sorry for technical and getting it all set up. Whatever. For those that may not know me, if watching on GKR's or Joe's,
I'm not even streaming, so
you're not even streaming,
I just linked to yours.
Okay, cool. So, welcome everybody. Cypher here from Crowdsource Politics. So Joe, GKR, decided that he would like to talk to me because we got into a very small debate on Twitter, and everybody knows that Twitter is trash. So we decided to take the debate over voice. We're going to be talking today about Citizens United and probably just in general money and politics. But before we get started into the actual conversation, Joe, why don't you introduce yourself? Let my audience know who you are and why you do what you do and whatever it is you want to say.
Sure. So my name is GKR Joe, whatever you want to call me. I occasionally make videos about politics. I haven't really done it in a while, trying to lean back into it. I have a master's degree in criminal justice. I have a enthusiast level interest in the legal system as well. So I listen to and read a lot of like stuff about the legal system. So I have I would like to think I have a more robust opinion on Citizens United than you get from most people. So I guess we'll find out if I can change our friend's mind and make him a sane person. So time will tell.
Well, we'll see, because I've been debating this since it basically came into existence, and I actually changed my mind. I used to be very anti-Citizens United, and over time I've been like, well, what is really the difference between this and, say, I don't know, money and politics in general? So we'll see. First, let's go ahead and like cut to the chase. So what is your biggest issue with Citizens United?
Money is speech is a completely ludicrous concept. It doesn't originate in Citizens United, but that's where the doors are really blown off of. The idea that like just because money is speech that we can't put any restrictions on it is a completely ludicrous extension of that, right? Like if we like no rights are absolute, and the way that it's used in Citizens United, like we just can't restrict what billionaires and rich people can do with their money. It's absolutely insane because we restrict people's right to speech, how they can do their speech in many other capacities, right? We have like designated free speech zones. Sorry, I'm getting more into it, but like that idea, we'll get into that like more in depth later. So
you're basically saying there should be some sort of limits on what is and is not acceptable speech, like we have limits on it already, and that money should be also one of those things that are limited, more or less.
So like even like I'm not even talking about policing content. So everything I'm talking about isn't about policing the content of speech, right? So that's like there's different constitutional standards based on like what you're doing, right? Hold on, I have it written down somewhere here so I don't misquote it. So time, place, and manner restrictions tend to be the least held as regard, right? If I'm telling you can't like talk about communism or you can't talk about like being gay or something like that, like these are protected because it's the content of the message that you're regulating. In Citizens United, it's not money's not regulating what you're saying; it's how you can say it and where you can say it, right? Which is the lowest form of scrutiny that should be applied to anything. Because all we're trying to do is level a playing field in terms of like how your speech can be heard, right? There's laws against me just walking into your neighborhood, taking out a bullhorn at 2 a.m. and just screaming about the Jews or whatever. Sorry, I won't make a joke like that again. But like there's regulations like that you can't just you're a nuisance, you're a disturbance, right? If you want to have a protest, you need to schedule a time and the place to do it, right? Then those rules are content neutral, and money and speech shit would also be content neutral. Or sorry, money in politics, or like your limits on campaign advertisements or how you can advertise. These things are content neutral.
So would you have? Is your is your issue more with along the lines of the fact that, unlike a lot of other places in the world, we have pretty much a 2 or 3 year election cycle. During the entire time, you're able to release any ads that you want. Doesn't matter where it's coming from or who's doing it. It's not so much necessarily the fact that you can create these super PACs and there's dark money and that sort of thing. Or would you say that it's all those things and more? Like,
I would say all those. So I would go further. Like this is not the subject of this, but when it comes to like
Sure.
regulating speech and disinformation, misinformation, now the area of criminal justice that I tend to research is radicalization, domestic terrorism,
Sure.
and the things that lead to that. So pursuant to that, you run into like how propaganda functions and like how dangerous and damaging misinformation is. I like to think if you've been awake for the past few fucking years, you can kind of understand how bad disinformation, misinformation is. From vaccine hesitancy to believing elections are stolen, those things that all I guess the lying about elections being stolen underpinning January 6th and all that. So you have all the stuff you can point to of the very damaging effects of misinformation, right? I think I can make an argument for why we should have better regulation around that, how it might be like what's the term? The rights that aren't explicitly identified in the Constitution, but the respect. I forgot the term for it. There's a specific thing in the Constitution that says like there are rights that are not specifically enumerated. Oh, it's the enumeration clause. Yeah. It's rights are not specifically enumerated here, but still exist. Like it's not exclusive in that way. Like there's plenty of stuff like that. Like your right to actually voting is not an actual right you have in the Constitution. Many people don't realize that. Right to privacy is also like an implied right, like an enumerated right. There's many of these rights that we like take for granted that we think we have that are not explicit in the Constitution. They're enumerated.
Yeah, they're implicit. They're implicit. Like another one of those kind of things would be like the fact that the government controls its own budget and therefore can get states to do what it wants using money. That's an implicit power of government. It's not an enumerated and explicitly stated in the Constitution.
And like many stuff like this applies like when you talk about like regulations versus laws, like regulations are carried out by the federal government that are delegated legal powers to the executive from Congress because it's something they can't do, right? Like constantly updating what level of arsenic is acceptable in your water level or what level of CO2 is harmful to or toxic materials are capable of limiting, right? So that's not technically in the Constitution, but it's a pretty understood principle that don't get me wrong, conservatives are working their best to undermine that so they can abolish the whole federal government, but they haven't gotten there yet. So until then, it seemed acceptable that we can have an entire regulatory body in the executive.
Yeah. No, I get where you're coming from with that. So I guess my follow-up question would be then, okay, let me explain a little bit about mine before I ask a follow-up question, since I've just been barraging you with questions. So I think one of the things that I have with this and the why I think, so when Roberts wrote the majority opinion for Citizens United, he said that we could have sunshine laws, right?
Was it Kennedy or Roberts?
I thought it was Roberts that wrote. Maybe the majority opinion was written by Kennedy and Roberts wrote a concurring or something like that. I don't remember.
Okay, I just do like a quick little history on it. I don't know exactly what the majority opinion, but it's not really relevant. So the initial question that went before the Supreme Court was just whether or not underneath the McCain-Feingold Act, which restricted like the time and specifically before primaries and elections, what could be said in a certain ad, right? So there's this hack organization called Citizens United, which was aggressively just a political organization trying to run ads and trying to skirt shit. Previously, they had made a complaint to the not the FCC, the election committee. Commission. It's not the FCC. What is it? Federal election? FEC. I'm sorry.
FEC.
Yeah. So they made a complaint to the FEC about Michael Moore's documentary saying, "Oh, he's violating this. Don't let him push his stuff, right? Because it's shit talking a Republican, and they like Republicans,
right?"
So they tried initially suing, getting people to shut up there, and then they're like, "Well, we'll just create our own hack studio and do this." So the specific question they were supposed to answer was just, "Is this bullshit film studio clearly in violation of FEC guidelines compared to someone like Michael Moore, who's a bona fide documentarian, right?" And every lower court was just like, obviously, you're just a hack political activist. You're not getting away with this. It's obvious what you're doing, right? So that was the initial question you're supposed to answer, whether or not his studio, their like makeshift studio, qualified as just an explicitly political organization or someone who is saying political things just pursuant to their legitimate film studio things that they do. The Supreme Court is supposed to answer questions in the most narrow way they possibly can. Generally speaking, you're not supposed to blow out something unless it's really necessary. You're not supposed to answer constitutional questions unless you need to. So they had a very specific like statutory interpretation they were supposed to do, and then I think Kennedy wrote this opinion, and they're like, wait, hold on, Kennedy's the swing vote, and Kennedy was just like free speech, blah blah blah, because he's a fucking libertarian. So then we got that basically, and then they ended up rehearing the case, but the opinions were already written, and we knew they were going like the whole where we ended up with Citizens United. So they answered a completely different constitutional question they weren't supposed to, because they felt like, oh, we can use this case as a way in which to introduce even more money in politics, and they did. So that's the short version. I don't know who ended up writing the majority opinion. I thought it was just the Kennedy.
It was Kennedy. I just looked it up really quick just to make sure. So either way, I know that Roberts had stated that basically that we can have, it was a lot. Roberts and Scalia basically said you can't limit what campaign contributions are because money is speech, right? That was the basic ruling. But you could have Sunshine laws, and the reason I was bringing that up is because since then. They've knocked down
laws about disclosure. Yeah, I had that in my notes too. They're like,
meanwhile,
it'll be fine with unlimited money because there'll be disclosure laws. Now,
like, wait, disclosure laws.
That could hamper speech. It's like, you motherfucker.
Yeah, and they're like, no, you have a right to privacy, and like, this is bullshit. You were just giving people a reason to like, okay, I can kind of see where you're coming from. To, in the future, just kind of like
this is what's conventionally referred to as the Roberts two-step. He does a little lean and then a huge push, and it's always one case where he's like, but I've said it in that last one, and then you have like rights like Shelby County just being completely obliterated and struck down. For those unaware, Shelby County is what gutted the Voting Rights Act, which is probably one of the main reasons that Donald Trump became president. But topic for another time.
Yeah, we got your environmental Seattle saying that Citizens United is super important and that corporations are people. My friend quoting Mitt Romney there. So to get into a little bit of it. So I initially agreed with everybody else that no, money isn't speech, whatever. And as I went down my own logic hole with it, I started being like, okay, so what's the difference between this and whatever else has been being done with people setting up, say, a think tank? What's the difference between this and somebody writing a book that is critical? What is this between somebody and doing a movie? Are we going to say that people can't own newspapers because they're politically engaged? And then I'm like, okay, so logically, if all these things end up having the same effect and actually arguably a worse effect, then how can we be okay with these things and not okay with Citizens United?
Sure. So I would say like there's a few questions I want to go down first, but I could sort of I guess we'd start there. My issue with that is like with many rights that we enjoy, there's what's called balancing tests, right? We have to balance competing interests. The general interest in the U.S. as a ostensible democracy is to have people's voices heard in a fair and equitable manner, right? So you're always going to have rights competing against each other. In this instance, well, we could say like, oh, a newspaper, like okay, in a vague sense, sure, this is similar to what just donating money directly would do, because they have you can have like clear interests and you can have biases there, and you can have a political agenda, right? But you could say like, oh, these serve a certain function. We could still do certain types of regulation, right? But when you have these just a clear and explicit political interests, when you get into stuff like even think tanks, the way think tanks are now funded, which is like completely ludicrous. I don't know if I want to go back there. Basically, the way think tanks are now funded, like when they're like nonprofits. I'm reading a book on it now. Actually, it's by Nancy Meyer. It's called I think it's called Dark Money. Actually, it's a really good book.
Probably Dark Money.
Yeah, have you read that?
No, but I've read enough about it. I should say.
Yeah, one of the things she talks about is how like initially even having like charitable donations going towards like political stuff, it was like super taboo and not okay. Yeah. But basically over time, the government carved out like when we're taxing rich people, they're like, listen, if you're just donating to charitable stuff, that's fine. We'll allow we'll exempt you from taxes for that. And then that turned into them being like, wait, I can just donate to charitable causes, to nonprofits that I actually control and have a specific political vested interest. And probably the most famous is the Kochs are doing it, but there's many more right-wing ghouls actively doing that. Because like left-wing billionaires, what 100%. They do is they run vanity campaigns for president of the United States. That's what they do with their billions. What right-wing billionaires do is they go, we're so unlikable and ugly and disgusting at our core that what we need to do is actually funnel our money into like covert advertising with like Citizens for a Responsible Government or whatever the fuck they're.
I'm going to push back on that because it's not so much that they're unlikable. It's that this way that they're going about it works better. So think about it, right?
It's a little bit of both. Like the Kochs tried running for president and failed.
Well, I mean, those the Koch brothers though, but they also were like, well, I don't really want to be president. Why do that when I can
want to lower my power?
Why would I want to lower my power? Exactly. So why do that when I can just fund like 20,000 fucking organizations across all 50 states having an ALEC and then having the laws written like I wanted anyways, right?
Yep.
So the reason I bring it up is because a lot of the stuff that we talk about, we're talking general money and politics, that you can control to a degree, but not as much as people actually think. And I think not only do I think it's not as much as people can think, because what's going to happen, right? So you already see this. You have fake hire crowd situations where you have trying to basically have a crowd on demand. I think that's even the fucking name of this thing. Jesus Christ, I hate all this shit. But you have like crowds on demand, and you can make a crowd peer pretty much in support of whatever you need. And they have their own printers and everything like that. So they have all the signs and everything that you need. And they just come in and support a cause or anti-support a cause. So you had it for union busting. You had it for fucking there was some sort of like road that was going to be created, and it was going to now impact some sort of business, so they hired it so they would be anti the road. And then it got people engaged in being against this road that would have impacted this other business weirdly. And
famously Trump did that when announcing his 2016 presidential election. He paid for the audience there.
And why wouldn't
it happens with tons of stuff.
Why wouldn't you? It makes you look legitimate. And how can you control that? How can you tell people you can't do this? How can you regulate that? Like I don't. So onto the think tank thing. So there's John Troughton. Hold on, John Fountain. It's T something. It's anyways, this John guy, Center for Immigration Studies. Center for Immigration Studies.
Is that the racist one?
It's in the title, super racist.
Yes. The pro-immigration, low immigration in the tagline.
Yeah. So it's John Tanton. John Tanton has not made just one of these groups. He started making these groups in the 1980s. Numbers USA, Centers for Immigration Studies, and there's another one. I think it's Freedom or some shit, something stupid. How we're conservatives always put freedom in everything, even though they're like it's anti-freedom. He made 3 of these organizations, and what they do is they all echo each other, and so it gives the idea of legitimacy to their fake studies, and it gets propagated through the right-wing media, and it has been since it's basically their inception, either through not fan letters, through like pamphlets that they would send out to mailers and like NRA or whatever. Like you get those giant mailing lists and mail the pamphlets out to people for free. Now the internet exists, so people can just go look it up online, and that's super effective because it looks like you're creating consent. Look like you're creating consensus.
I don't want to say manufacturing consent, but it's sort of.
It is. No, that's exactly what it is. So how can citizens, like, even if Citizens United wasn't ruled on, how would you be able to, regulate this in any feasible way?
There's
and Citizens United doesn't even make this worse. It should have made it more open, but with the sunshine stuff and everything like that, like you have to file it with.
Well, there's no sunshine requirement.
I'm saying it should have.
I was going to say one of their arguments when they were creating that opinion is like, this won't lead to corruption, the perception of corruption, because we'll have the news people and there'll be accountability and transparency because they have to report this, right? But like there was mechanisms to hide money in it anyway, and it was bullshit. It was straight up bullshit.
It was super bullshit. But what's the difference between buying ads and creating a super PAC versus doing all this other stuff? What's the difference? What's the operative difference?
They should just both be illegal. I don't have a problem saying
How can you have both be illegal and still have free speech?
because I can limit the same way like you and I are limiting the donations we can make to political campaigns to what 2,200, 2,600 an election cycle or something per politician.
To political campaigns, but what's the difference between me having my podcast and then me having 20 podcasts that all say the same thing?
What's the difference between that? I think when you're intentional. So if it's you on that every single podcast talking about
it, I'm on 3 podcasts, and then I have say I'm Mr. Moneybags, and so I have a bunch of people, and it create basically my own news organization. Yeah. Now we're all parroting the same thing, but it doesn't look like it's all the same thing because it's from different people. What's the difference?
I think when you have it where it's like news or news adjacent, I'd probably let that slide a little bit more. When you have like think tanks being funded by like dark, I think the closer you get it to being like legitimate news, which I think we can make a fair. It's not hard to judge what is and isn't real fucking news. I think an intelligent group of people
all cable news is trash because it's infotainment, but it's still considered news.
You could find some. Well, I'm saying like that vacillates within like the realm of being like real fucking news, where I just be like, okay, I can understand where that's close enough to that line where whatever, right? And at a certain point, like you just make judgment calls, right? This is how most things in our world function. And you can have bodies like actually the good example is the case that led to Citizens United. You had the circuit courts and then an appeals court who just said, we all see what you're fucking doing. You're not fooling anybody that you're a legitimate documentary company. We know what you're fucking doing. We can look at your history. We can look at the only stuff you produce. We fucking know that you are not a bona fide documentary or filmmaking group. You are you are just playing fucking games, right? There are people who make these decisions, can clearly see what they're doing and say, no, you're full of shit. And then they went to the Supreme Court, which is filled with hacks who want to, who think rich people are better than you and deserve more of a say in politics. And a vehicle for that is by allowing unlimited sums of money into our political machine. So that's what they fucking did. But the point is, at every other phase, that worked as like a test, right? You can look at, like you and I can both say, probably, I would think we'd agree on this, that Michael Moore, while he has a vested political perspective, is a legitimate, bona fide guy who just makes political documentaries, right?
What's the difference between Michael Moore and Steve Bannon? Besides politics, I'm saying, like, because Steve Bannon, that's what he did. He funded, produced, and directed documentaries prior to being a political advisor.
Sure. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on the former FEC rules that Citizens United completely destroyed or whatever.
I don't really care about the former rules. I'm talking about just like logically speaking here. How would you be able to? Yeah. Don't worry about the actual rules.
The extent to which Steve Bannon is invested explicitly in a political project and involved with money to exert those ends is probably where I would say you would see that difference, right? Like,
but that's all Michael Moore does. Michael Moore,
he's actively involved in campaigns,
he's actively involved in left-wing causes, and every single documentary that he does has a left-wing slant to it.
Well, I was saying like the extent to which he's involved, like for Steve Bannon as an example, he's had his weird little film studio making stuff like what's it called, like Fire from the Heartland, or say Awakening the Conservative Woman, and like all types of like weird fucking shit that's been coming out for a while. But he's been explicitly involved in like politics, attempting to get like Sarah Palin to like lead his weird fascist environment that he wants and stuff like that, right? And even that with the documentary is like, okay, for one, the Citizens United one that was called into question, right? One of the things they're trying to do is called it was like Hillary the movie or something like that. And it was just basically a hit piece on Hillary Clinton, right?
Yep.
And I could be wrong about this, but like Michael Moore, when he makes a documentary, usually it goes into movie theaters, it goes to some service. They just want to make it free on demand to show to as many people as humanly possible. There's not so much a monetary interest in there in like creating something interesting and generating money as there's like a explicit advertising propaganda effort going on there.
But isn't that speech?
Yeah, and I have no problem regulating. So we're getting like Citizens United isn't just this, right? This is where we're at.
No, I know. Line. That's why I'm expanding it.
Sure. Like right now we're at the line of where like, okay, on one side of this line, bad hombre, on one side of this line, good hombre, right? Like I would say like the line exists somewhere in that area, and I'm comfortable saying that. And like I don't have all the facts on hand to tell you exactly how to distinguish these two. And maybe I'd say like I would let the Steve Bannon thing fucking fly if you ask me. Maybe I would. I don't know. But so far as like developing a pack where all these like weird front groups, like have you ever seen the Coctopus image or whatever, or like the stuff talking about? Not so the Coctopus is just the derogatory name used to describe the way the Koch brothers fund stuff. So you have like these two like giant organizations they funnel all like hundreds of millions of dollars into, right? And from there it goes into what is basically like 100 different groups. Like one's like supposed to be like representing like seniors. It's like
Sure.
60s concerned citizens or something, and Americans for Prosperity, and it's all nonsense. And they're explicitly doing it so that they look like a group of concerned citizens who are just trying to like seem like they're like, oh, we have a legitimate problem, or Americans for like healthcare or something, and they use that to give like the legitimate air to it, and then basically just shovel bullshit at people using tons of fucking money to just basically lean you in a certain direction by mostly lying to you, and then just overwhelming your airways with information, usually bullshit information. And that's what they're doing, and that's where I have a much bigger fucking problem.
Citizens United didn't allow that to happen. That was happening before Citizens United existed.
I think as Buckley v. Vallejo is where that started, but Citizens United made it easier to get large sums of money, and
Citizens United
made
allowed
the line between campaigns even shallower.
So Citizens United allowed the existence of super PACs to exist. Political action committees was a thing that was in the bipartisan the McCain-Feingold law, and it's basically saying, hey, we don't want to like stop your neighborhood association from getting together, raising some money to promote a political cause. That would definitely be against free speech. But we want to be able to like say, hey, you can't just give an unlimited amount of money to a political candidate because that would be bad and cause issues.
So, well, let's erode. I want to try to like erode this line like a little bit. So,
but one second, I want to get your Environmental Seattle's comment in here real quick. So he said that in Seattle there is a revolving door between legitimate news and public relations companies. Reporters will be rewarded or punished for their coverage after their employment contract runs out. And this is another issue that has existed since all of fucking time. Basically, you have the same thing with the SEC. It's just this whole revolving door between politics and business or whatever. So I just wanted to put that out there. This is also stuff that we need to be paying attention to. But go ahead.
So I want to talk about is like, what's the difference between a corporation donating to a PAC or rich people donating to a PAC or whatever versus a concerned group of citizens pulling their money. And my answer to that would be that when you abstract it enough, you're like, well, it's just groups of people who are working together for like a cause or whatever, right? But when I join like a group of local concerned citizens for a specific issue, and we pull money to advertise for a given thing, I'm explicitly aware of what my money and my time are going towards. Versus like, I don't know if you seem like someone who probably has investments. Like I own a whole bunch of ETFs. I'm invested in all these fucking companies. Okay. I have no fucking idea what I own in these ETFs. I'm so abstracted from being part of a group that to describe me as having a valid interest in what's going on there or being aware of how they're using my money or the company that I own a part of is just ludicrous. It doesn't exist. You can say like, oh, they're acting on behalf of my interest, but no, they're fucking not. If I have an ETF that has like oil money and I support green energy, just because my ETF is invested in oil money doesn't mean that I support them, like astroturfing how climate change isn't real. Like I don't. It's so detached from like the group interest that they're claiming that I have the corporations representing, because like I have no meaningful actual association apart from like a financial stake that's so abstracted due to the way our finances work. It's not a real fucking line.
Sure. Okay. So about the corporation thing. So I think you can actually control the corporation thing to a degree. I think I think there's two things that can come out from that. One, it shouldn't be a tax write-off to donate to political campaigns, period.
Yeah.
End of story. Make that illegal. No tax write-offs for donating to political causes, to social causes, none of this stuff. You get to claim a tax write-off if you donate to like the ACLU or some other like direct helping people with things stuff, but not any of these like causes. So like, people that donate for Medicare for all to like Our Revolutions, no tax write-off. You don't get a tax write-off for that. You don't get a tax write-off for doing it for the conservative side of the house either.
Wait, but donating to the ACLU, you're saying you want them to get a tax write-off? Because then you went to the Americans for Prosperity problem, because that's what they basically are. They're a nonprofit organization instead of a campaign. If anything, I'd say the opposite.
The ACLU actually represents and protects people in an actual effort to protect free speech. So they actually hold cases and stuff like that. They're not just political.
I'm not disagreeing with that. Well, if you ask people like, what's the ACLU's bent, right? Everyone's gonna say liberal, right? Like,
it's not the bent that's the issue. It's the fact that you don't get a tax write-off if you're giving to a group of people that is, for any reasonable person, is 100% political. So, or nearly there. So Americans for Prosperity, 100% political. ACLU, not. Like they actually represent people in cases
So
for
I would
a
agree that we
free
could draw
pro
the.
bono basis.
I think reasonably people could draw this line that you're talking about, right? But this is what you got to move for. Like, what's the difference between Michael Moore and Steve Bannon? And I can say the same thing here. What's the difference between the ACL and Americans for Prosperity, right? Like, there's that you're on the line there too. And I think a reasonable person could make the distinction you're making. But if you're going to get overly like technical on like, oh, we need to have broad rules that apply to everybody, I think you run into that same problem.
And then I would be okay with not giving a tax write-off to anybody, but I understand why people want tax write-offs. So that would be one thing. Two, you don't allow companies to do it without having a sign off from the board of directors, and you don't allow them to do it unless you have that as public record. So company Exxon donates a bunch of money to Americans for Prosperity, for example, or some anti-climate thing. That's going to be dead center in every single fucking ad paid for by ExxonMobil. Like you don't get to me, you don't have privacy
to the original like source or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, you don't get to have privacy when you're donating for political causes, because the other person needs to know who is supporting these political causes to understand how they're actually going to impact things.
I would have a tough time.
Unless you have a 6-figure salary, donations don't matter anymore. True, because of how they changed the tax laws recently.
If I were to like just quickly say like what my perfect world would be, it'd be publicly financed elections, no outside money at all. You don't get to donate to political candidates. We publicly fund elections to whatever the amount is in a given area. Each candidate who hits a certain threshold gets X amount of funding or whatever, and they get to use it however they see fit, but no outside shit whatsoever. But
so you would essentially get rid of free speech though. In that way, if you want it enforceable,
I don't think. Sorry, go on.
No. Go ahead and stipulate some more.
I mean, I think you still you could still go out and you can like individually campaign. You can work for a campaign. You can say what you want. The candidates can say what they want, but their ability to run ads and stuff will just come from a public pool of money and nowhere else. Like I'm not going to put that contingent.
It's ads it's only ads you have an issue with.
It's any like I don't want to say it's just ads. It's all like the dark money that tends to fund. I won't just say ads, but all these like dumbass think tanks like Mercatus, which is hack shit, Cato, which is hack shit, and like various
Cato's
other things.
A mixed bag, but yeah, I got you.
It's a mixed bag, but it's explicitly funded by Koch money, and they have extensive control over what the Cato Institute does. So I feel comfortable calling it hack shit, but I'd also say it's less hack than a whole lot of other stuff. But
it's not Heritage Foundation.
No, I don't think Heritage is co-funded. Heritage is by oil billionaires. I don't remember which ones.
Heritage Foundation is essentially Christo-fascist now.
But hey man, they give us the ACA. We got to thank them for that.
Nah, that's true. That's fine. But no, so this is where I have an issue when it comes to like discussing this with people that are more left-leaning than I am.
Sure.
I don't see the difference operatively between what you're saying with these think tanks and a regular person going out and doing the same thing, or a group of regular people going out and do the same thing. I don't think you can actually have that line and have it be enforceable because of how the First Amendment is set up. I think you would have to alter the First Amendment.
We still have you don't at all, because we used to have restrictions on how money can be spent because there was a vested interest. But
it never prevented the things you were just talking about. It never prevented think tanks. It never prevented group associations.
I'm not saying
never prevented
think tanks. I'm saying funding of think tanks where they're like.
It never prevented this.
Well, I'm not saying think tanks should be illegal.
How's that?
Wait, hold on. Using charitable donations to support explicitly political organizations, that was illegal.
No, it was not illegal.
It was.
No.
Totally was. Totally was not okay to do that before Buckley v. Vallejo or whatever.
When was that?
That was the case that precedes this one. I would struggle to get that source for you. If you give me a bit, I can probably do it later. But my understanding is that
I just need to know when it was read, because it could just be a thing I'm just not aware of because it happened so early ago. 1971. Hold on.
You can look it up too. It was something. So I listened to audiobooks primarily, and that's one of the things. That's one of the things that was being talked about in.
No, see, I'm not talking about elections here. That's the thing. Okay, so this was. But this held hard limits on election spending in the Federal Elections Campaign Act of 1971 are unconstitutional. In a per curiam opinion, they ruled that the expenditure limits contravene the First Amendment provision of freedom of speech because a restriction on spending for political communication necessarily reduces the quantity of expression. It limited disclosure provisions and limited the Federal Elections Commission's power. Justin Byron White dissented in part and wrote that Congress had legitimately recognized the unlimited election spending as a moral danger against which effective preventive and curative steps must be taken. The problem is that even prior to that law, you had different groups of people doing explicitly political things, and it was not illegal. That's what I'm saying. Like,
I should
think tanks existed prior to, like, one of the first think tanks is the Council of Foreign Relations. Or not one of the first ones, but it's the oldest one that I can think of. It was like established in 1907 or some shit. And they've been around since then, and it's a legitimate thing, but they bend towards conservative foreign, American conservative foreign policy, let's say.
Well, I'll say, I'll amend what I said before a little bit. That using charitable donations as like tax write-off to fund think tanks, and for think tanks being like more explicitly political, that didn't used to be a thing, and you couldn't do that, and that wall was eroded. So whether or not you can still donate with political ends to what's it called, think tanks, I'd be less certain of that. So I'll back off what I said a little bit. Okay,
so you and I are in agreement. I don't care if it's. I think get rid of all the tax write-offs. I don't care about the tax write-offs.
Yeah. That's what I meant, because we already that,
so the tax write-off thing, fine. Like, get rid of all, if you can't draw that line between like the ACLU and American Prosperity, then no one gets a tax write-off for it. I don't really care, right? I want sunshine laws too. These are two things that I think you can do, but I don't think it's actually going to really stop much in the ways of what we're talking about, because what we're talking about is effective. And it's worth the money that they spend on it, even if it's not a tax write-off. So it'd make it more expensive, and maybe the elimination of some privacy based on a certain threshold, because some people get squeamish when you're like, oh, if even a person that donates $5 needs their name on a log, and I'm like, maybe, I don't know. Like, you got to make these things legally palatable, right? So I don't know if you have to have that in order to have the other thing, but to me, because these things are effective, then you're not really going to control much in the ways of political speech that is nefarious without amending the First Amendment. Now, before we get in, your Environmental Seattle says again, what about an ad blackout near the end of a campaign? We can limit speech when it's overwhelming, protects the public. You can't yell fire in a theater. We should accept dark money October surprise because the reporting requirements are so weak. That I can agree with as well.
That used to basically
the UK has that. France has it too. I think everybody basically, like, the 6 weeks before the election, nobody can report anything.
That was true with the thing that was guiding Citizens United too. So the issue with them running that Hillary Clinton movie was the time frame in which they were doing. Not that they couldn't do it, but that they were trying to skirt, like, if you're aggressively political or an explicitly political organization, you can't run these ads within, I think it was like 60 days of a primary, or like 30 days for a general. It's something like that. I don't remember the exact day count. But that's what the law was. And that's what they were trying to get a bypass through. But I think it just got basically overridden. They were just being like, oh, we qualify. And then they're like, nah, actually, we're just going to get rid of the whole law.
Right. So I can agree with things like that. I just don't see... I don't see getting money out of politics, which is what a lot of people say mean what they said they're against Citizens United. I don't see that being effective with free speech, and I don't know how to make it effective and protect free speech. Like, I don't see how we can square the circle.
So okay. Oh man, it's like three different. Hold on, what do you think of how I'm going to do this? It's like three different things I want to say. I'm not sure what order or how to do this properly. All right. So I think that, generally speaking, most people don't expect to be lied to when they're consuming news or media or information. Would you think that's a fair statement? Most people operate under the assumption they're receiving accurate and fair information.
I think most people even assume that of some ads. at points. So yes, I agree.
Yeah, well, because we literally have laws that regulate how much you're allowed to lie in an advertising campaign, right? You can't just say like, oh, this is going to make you grow 6 inches, right? They'll be like, no, you can't be selling snake oil to people, right? For some reason, we exempt political shit from this, right? And I can understand being a little hesitant to regulate like a politician, what they're saying, or particularly on the campaign trail, where you're like, oh, well, what's a lie versus what's like if I want to say immigrants are criminals, right? There's ways you can abstract that language enough to where it would be technically true, but in a meaningless way. So it's like, all right, I can understand being more hesitant there. But when it comes to like, more abstracted interests where money's coming from other places, I see like a much more vested interest in regulating the sanctity of information that people are going to be consuming. And I know that sounds like, oh, you're talking about censorship. Like, I mean, yeah, to an extent. Like, I don't think most people want to be lied to. I'm telling you that there's means that we can do to regulate people from lying and spreading bullshit around, which is what's largely happening with these like front groups.
Do you think that should be a coming from the government having a giant hammer, or do you think it should be something more along the lines of letting the court and civil society regulate it?
What do you mean by civil society? Like people just being like, "Boo-hoo, I don't approve of you." I don't really believe.
More like allowing So let's use the conservative playbook here, right? So conservatives in Texas allowed any citizen to sue anybody to help a woman get an abortion because they wanted to make abortion legal without getting the government involved. Wouldn't it be permissible to allow somebody to have the standing to sue if they observed an ad that was effectively lying to them and sue the ad maker for false advertisement?
You're saying, would I approve of that?
What I'm saying is, should it be the government saying, no, you in fact lied, here's what we have? Or should it be a person, a private citizen going through the court process, evidentiary findings, etc., and having that be the regulatory speech?
I would say I don't want to fix the problem. I want to prevent it from happening. So when you're talking about legal remedies for that, you're talking about a curative coming post injury, right? When I could just say we could stop the injury from occurring. So I think the problem with that is like, right, that'll just be calculated into cost in doing business, right? Like, okay, I'm going to pay a $10,000 fine for lying in an advertisement. Like, that's a rounding error to these people. Like, it doesn't. I
mean,
matter.
If it's that low.
Sure. I mean, I think you'd run into a difficult time, like coming up with something that like seems reasonable or whatever. I'd rather just not allow nonsense like that to happen, or have an infrastructure in place that doesn't let that occur. Because
go ahead.
To quickly explain like how propaganda functions, it's actually super fucking easy. And the reason why propaganda is used is because like it works. And for people to think like you're so individually minded that it's not going to affect you, you're stupid. No. You're the dumbest person of all. Like if you don't think propaganda works against you, you're actually the most vulnerable type of person to propaganda. I'm very aware of it. It still works on me. It works on everybody. You're not a special snowflake. We're all vulnerable to propaganda. Get over yourself. Okay. And it's this like overly individualistic mindset where people think they're rational actors, like existing in the fucking world. That leads to like this stuff even working even more, which makes it a fucking problem. So propaganda is super fucking simple. All you have to do is repeat something over and over again. It becomes familiar to people, and things that are familiar feel true. It is that fucking simple. I don't need to make it more complicated. That's the gist of it. You get into like how violence justified, which are extensions of that. But overall, if I just repeat something enough, it sounds familiar, right? You ever talk to someone and they're like, yeah, immigrants are criminals. And you're like, no, actually, they have lower crime rates. You can look at like blah, blah, blah studies. They're like, you're just crazy. Like they came here illegally, which means that they don't respect our laws or our customs. And what they're actually doing is you're undermining something that they just really, really think is true because they've heard it 1,000 fucking times before your conversation. You're saying something that's so counterintuitive to them because everything that they know and trust has said it to them repeatedly over and over again, right? And that's the problem that comes from when you have organizations who are allowed to basically propagandize in this manner, doing it in these abstracted ways where they look like trusted sources, giving you real information, like, oh, we're just elderly concerned people. No, you're Coke. I hate that I always just go to Coke because I feel like I should learn other billionaire names that are more like readily. Otherwise, you sound like some crazy lib who only knows like the
I'll give you one. Just give me a second. I gotta look. The Wilkes brothers. I think it's Wilkes.
Right. The Wilkes. Those are the Texas oil ones. They're the Turning Point USA
they're
bros,
the
right?
evangelical Christo-fascists.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of them. So like really like I thought about making a list so I could like cycle through them just for the sake of not just repeatedly saying Koch brothers, but then I just didn't do that because I was lazy. So I'm gonna own that right now. I've heard a whole bunch of student. Yeah, I was just like, it's not that important. Whatever. He won't judge me too hard. I'll just own that. Like I'm too lazy to remember all their stupid fucking names. because they do their best to like try and hide their fucking names and shit
Yeah.
too. They want to be as abstracted from these movements as fucking possible. Like, and what's weird is like, I don't want to just fully say all this stuff is astroturf, because it's the way propaganda like sort of works is nothing's ever going to be fully astroturfed, right? So the Tea Party is a good example. There are people who legitimately believed in the Tea Party stuff, but part of that comes from the initial like funding was astroturf. They just made up this fucking movement. They just paid tons of money. They got like their friends at Fox News and whatever to like advertise like Tea Party stuff and talk about like, oh, look at all these concerned citizens. But you probably have like 100 people. Meanwhile, you have like 10,000 people or whatever at Occupy Wall Street, and they just fucking ignore this shit, right? But they give so much media attention to stuff like, but I just forget what I was talking about. The Tea Party assholes. Yeah. They give so much attention to them. And then you have money propping up the stuff. You have all these people who are getting actively paid to organize these protests, to generate information, to buy ad space for them. And then actual people just hear it's like, oh, people really care about this thing. And then they just show up. And they just show up and they get invested because they just keep hearing about this. The ACA, it's going to lead to me, being put on a death panel, right? And you hear that 1,000 times. Like, and we're the Tea Party, and we're going to have a Citizens for Concern Public Health meeting here, right? And you see like 10 advertisers like, yeah, fuck it, I'll go. That's only a 20-minute drive away. And that's how you like go from being astroturf to integrating like real people who are now interested by virtue of just hearing your bullshit over and over again, right? It's super fucking annoying. So I'm saying like my general argument would be like, most people don't want to live in a society that's just controlled by like a handful of people. Like that, there's a handful of studies or whatever that talk about how the U.S. functions more like an oligarchy or whatever the fuck. But the way,
I'm not disagreeing with you.
No, I don't think we would disagree about this. I'm saying it more for like, I guess like other people who will maybe watch this. And we what was I going to say? And when we get like really dumbass lefty takes, like, well, they're just buying politicians. It's like it doesn't work like that. Like the way money corrupts people isn't by like them, oh, they accepted $100,000 in the back room, so they vote for this specific bill in this specific way. It doesn't work like that. A good example. Are you familiar with Project Red Map at all?
Yeah.
Okay. For those listening, quick overview. Project Red Map was the Republican-led effort in 2010 to take over as many state house seats as possible, as many vulnerable Democrat seats, to attack them, usually on the basis of like Obama's healthcare reforms and some other shit. And they were very, very, very successful. And that's where they basically gerrymandered the shit out of the state houses and the federal houses. And it was so bad to the point where I think it was in Wisconsin in 2018, Democrats won like 60% of the votes, I think, or like 55% of the votes, and got about 34% of the seats or something like that. That's how gerrymandered it is in Wisconsin. Democrats can't functionally win their state legislature because it's so fucked. So this was all done in 2010 on the back of redistricting, and it was done with, wait for it, $30 million. Our democracy was bought for $30 fucking million, a pitiful sum. And it's so sad that is what our just destroyed our elections for the foreseeable future. And we're still wrangling with that. Like we're still like, you have more gerrymandering efforts now. You have Democrats reciprocating, but like those state houses in Wisconsin, nothing's being fixed about that because the Supreme Court's like, oh, we don't have, whoa, we can't do anything about gerrymandering. That's a state's issue. It's interesting how it's a state's issue after it's already been decided in Republicans' favor in every fucking swing state. It's very, very frustrating. But it was done just for $30 million, just a pitiful sum. And what would happen was they would just go to these seats, right? Like a local state Senate seat is like, those elections are like, they might have $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Nothing.
Nobody votes in those either. So
exactly. So it's not hard to just throw, like, if you have a shitload of money, you could dedicate $50,000, $70,000, $100,000 of ads into this small district. Like, and these people, like, you have politicians talking about how like they just ran their safe seat all the time, and all of a sudden they were getting inundated with crazy ads. They had no idea where they were coming from, not from the guy that they're running against. Just these ads popping up telling people like, oh, this person's gonna like vote to take your guns away, and he's like, what? I've been a pro-gun Democrat for my whole fucking career. Like, what? But there's just so many ads on repeat saying this over and over again to Democrats who are in like somewhat vulnerable seats that eventually people buy into it and then act on that information. And it's like, that's not good. Most people don't want to vote on what is fundamentally a fucking lie. And I think we have like an interest in preventing that from occurring.
So how would you allow the government to determine what is and is not a lie without running afoul of giving the government that kind of authority to essentially target people it doesn't like? In this kind of situation, we can take it to either extremes. Trump would have used this against Black Lives Matter or, any left-leaning group that was even modestly pro, I don't know, Antifa, we'll say, or pro criminal justice reform. They're gonna come out and, take to the streets and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or on the other side, what about like a crazy Antifa kind of person that just hates all conservatives, and so they're going to try to use this kind of law that you're saying that needs to exist against the lies, quote unquote, of a person that is conservative? I guess we could actually use immigration as one of those examples, because there are some issues with immigration that the extreme left thinks is a lie, but isn't really. It's just a different way of looking at a thing.
Yeah, like I sort of mentioned the whole immigration lie before thing, where like there's a technical way you could abstract what crime means, where you're not wrong, but like you're clearly misleading people. If you want to say crossing the border in itself is a crime.
A person with a conservative mindset that has the kind of personality of a conservative person is going to look at a person illegally crossing the border as a moral wrong, even if not just because it's illegal, but because of how they view their entire world. They're like, it's the equivalent of breaking into my home is their idea of this. And that isn't wrong. It's just a different opinion about how a nation's sovereignty is maintained.
Oh man, I hate using debate terms, but it's like basically it's just like a classic like Mott and Bailey, right? Because like what they're doing is invoking like when I talk about crime rates, right, or like
this area is bad crime, right? When I say like, oh, the area you're looking to buy a house in has really bad crime, you don't think like, oh, people speed there. Right. Oh, there was like a bunch of jaywalking, right? What they're doing is they're referring to generally the index crimes that are tracked through the FBI's like
it's the violent
UCR
crimes,
data. Yeah, violent crime
robbery, rape,
or significant property crimes. Yeah, that's what's
Yeah.
being tracked. So when they say like immigrants are here committing crimes, that's what they're alluding to, right? And then when you back them up, they're like, well, crossing the border is a crime. Well, it's a misdemeanor. That's never tracked by fucking
but that's the
UCR
thing,
shit.
though. Conservatives legitimately believe illegally crossing the border is somewhat tantamount to illegally trespassing on someone's private property.
Yeah, but the rhetoric they're using is not invoking like this.
It doesn't matter, because even if you get them to agree, okay, illegal immigrants do not commit violent crime that much, they're still going to be against it because they don't like the idea of somebody illegally crossing onto their own property, because that is the kind of mentality that they have. At the base level, they just completely disagree with the left on a worldview.
And I think it's just abstracted racism, to be frank. I don't even think they're aware that they're operating on it. But
it could be, but when you listen to enough of these people, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not being racist, but you can't say that they are being racist because that is how their worldview is structured. They view a person that like the people that crossed into that the Black Lives Matter protest that crossed into that lawyer's property, and they were really just trying to cut through to break a police cordon. They viewed that as legitimately a threat to their safety.
Oh yeah. Like, I think you can have, well, just to clarify, they never were actually on these people's property. They're walking on a sidewalk in front of their property. I know that you're not bought into that, but I do want to clarify that they were just crazy, being super racist, right? But I think racism is a lot more like not so much like
okay. So
rallies.
Can you say that again? They were what now?
They were walking on like a sidewalk in front of it, like it was a private community, but like
it wasn't a private community. They owned both sides of the property. It was an entire private road that as soon as they crossed in that gate, they were on their property, because I don't remember the exact state this happened in, but they have all these kind of areas there because what's that? You say again?
It was Missouri.
Okay. I didn't want to be wrong, so I didn't say Missouri. So Missouri, they have all these private areas where it's just giant mansions where they own private roads. And so when they crossed into that area, like, they're being crazy. It's not like an actual threat to your, like, being crazy, quote unquote, but they legitimately believe that once you cross into someone's private property and you're not supposed to be there, you are a threat.
Yeah, I mean,
and
we could put a pin on that.
And for that example, there was what, 50 people?
If they personally owned that whole private road, they alone, because it was a private road for like a whole community.
Because they owned both sides of the property. It was originally a private community, but they bought the one mansion on one side and then they bought the mansion on the other side. So they owned the entire area.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. So I'll see that point.
I'll definitely I would look it back up, but I am like 98% sure that was the case. because I had to do it myself because I was like, wait, who owns private roads? What the fuck doesn't make any sense? And apparently it's just a thing in Missouri.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'll own that could be wrong. I still think they're operating off of at the very least latent racism. I think just I guess quick thing, not super related to this. I guess a lot of people act on like unconscious biases or implicit biases, and the way like racism is not abstracted. The way people like conceive of a racism is like you calling someone the N-word, right? But like to the black guy getting beaten by the police, whether or not you call him an N-word is immaterial to whether or not he's experiencing racial prejudice at the hands of the police. Like it's not really that big of a deal. It's sort of like it's happening and this sucks, you know?
FYI, your camera froze on my end.
Oh, hold on. Is it better now?
No, let me take you out. No, you're still. Are you frozen for everybody else?
I see it moving on in the Restream studio.
Oh, okay. Well then, it just must be on my end then. Let me go to Twitch real quick. Just keep. We can hear you, so it's fine.
Okay. Damn it. Yeah, like race, like the way most people are like racist is through like some like abstraction, right? Like they just have these biases towards like certain groups that they don't like consider racist, right? Because people think racism is just tantamount to calling someone evil these days. And I don't think it is. I think racism is better understood as like a scale, not a binary. I still see me moving on your thing, I think.
Yeah, it's moving on Twitch, so it's just
right.
Restream streams it multiple places, and so it might freeze in one spot, but it'd be fine for everybody else. So yeah, we're good. No, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I do think that worldview wise, you have to take these things into account when you make these laws. And I don't think it's one of those things that's easily taken into account. And so I don't know how it would be enforceable. And I don't know if I'm comfortable giving a supreme authority
if you say like
level of stuff in order to enforce it.
So I said like if it was a candidate saying it, I would be more apprehensive to regulate like straight disinformation or whatever. But when it's removed from that and you have like news or infotainment groups or think tanks that function similarly in that space, I think it's you're closer at like regulating stuff like that. But like we could even back out further, right? If you're not like right now we're talking about regulating content, right? And one of the first things I talked about is how if you regulate time, place, and manner of speech is much lower constitutional scrutiny. So if I were to just say like no group can like spend money in this way, in this manner, at this time for this thing, you're actually fine doing that because you're not distinguishing based on speech, right? I'm fine with going further and regulating certain types of speech and misinformation, disinformation, which would be more problematic for the reasons you outlined because you're running into bigger constitutional hurdles. But there's actually not a huge constitutional hurdle apart from the manufactured one from the Supreme Court saying like, well, this is speech. We can't abridge it at all. It's like, oh, fuck, man. I must have missed the time you said like a cursing, what's it? A fucking 14-year-old at a high school wearing a shirt with a curse word on it was constitutional to let them, punish,
Yeah.
They're like, well, the government has a vested interest in making sure profanity is not happening at school. It's like, well, dude, if they have a vested interest in something as inane as that, I'm trying to think. I think that's
at school though. Once it got outside of school and they tried to punish that girl for saying "fuck off" or something.
Yeah, that one didn't work out. But the one specifically that was happening at school, wearing a shirt with profanity on it, they have no problem saying there's a vested interest in that. They have no problem saying that you're allowed to regulate where protests can be held. They have no problem saying that curfews that restrict protests are fine, right? Because there's a vested government interest in maintaining some level of what's it called, like normalcy or sanctity or whatever. Not sanctity, like normalcy or preventing protests from getting out of hand or preventing bad outcomes from happening in these things. So if they're willing to concede that, and like I might have a problem with that or not, but I'm saying if you're willing to make that distinction there, how the fuck does this not apply to like how and when you can spend money on political advertisements or like what vehicles you can use for it? Because they're not regulating the speech, you're just regulating the medium, which is once again a much lower thing that we apply in many other because keep in mind protesting, like I'm going to go in a class warfare angle with this one. Like these are tools that you and I have that the average person has where we can protest, where we can show up, when we can do it, right? They're regulating how you and I can operate speech. Like what we're running into here is them telling us like, well, both a homeless person and a rich man have an equal right to sleep underneath or are both equally disallowed from sleeping under a bridge. Or alternatively, both me and Jeff Bezos have an equal right to spend $1 billion in an election cycle. Now, I don't materially have the access to do that. And inversely, while it's illegal for both the homeless person and the rich man to sleep under a bridge, that only materially affects one person.
Yeah.
So
I agree
when we
with you.
craft these laws that open up so that rich people have like unlimited say in all these different ways that they can make their political opinions heard, but then the way I can be fucking heard is limited in every way. Like there's a clear class interest here that they're siding
I
against.
think you are correct about time and place regulations. I just don't think we can actually regulate the content. And since you can't regulate the content, you can't actually get money out of politics.
Well, no, getting the money out of politics is content neutral.
You can't though because of the fact that because of free speech.
Can you connect these two for me?
Hold on a second. Yeah, so there isn't any operative difference between giving money to a candidate to say a thing and then creating a group or an ad or a book or a news article that says the same thing.
Wait, no, there is. They make this distinction specifically in Citizens United. They make the distinction of saying like the contributions you and I make to a campaign are limited to $2,600 or whatever.
I know they make the distinction. Okay. I'm saying operatively there is no difference, which is why they do political action groups, super PACs, and do a whole ton of fucking money into the super PACs and basically give pittance now to individual candidates. Unless they're trying to be like, hey, I'm giving you this money, and guess what? I'm also doing this stuff over here. I'm not supposed to tell you about it, but we're doing it too. Okay, got it. Yeah. You owe me now. Like, unless they're doing that, there's no operative difference between the two. Now there is giving $1 billion.
You think there's no functional difference between the two, or you think
there's there's
no legal difference between the two?
I'm saying there's no functional difference between.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Sorry, I thought you were telling me that the standard is there's no difference. I'm like, no,
operatively. Yeah, operatively.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and the reason why the Supreme Court ruled that like, oh, you can still limit direct money to campaigns is because that has a corrupting influence on it. They're stupid because if I'm fucking saying, hey, go support this person over here, or hey, in this election, we really want this issue to be the focus of the election, and only one person has this issue, should probably vote for that person. There's no difference between the two of those. And so that's why the Supreme Court was dumb in their ruling in that regard.
Dumb, or do they hate poor people?
They both.
Yeah.
False. You can ban obscene radio content if you have a safe harbor, 10 p.m. till 4 a.m. I don't know what in reference that was to your environmental Seattle.
I think
we have about a 20-second delay. So
I think what it might have been referring to was you saying, hold on, actually, maybe I'm wrong, but this is where I was going to talk about is, as I think it's fine to regulate the because we know PACs are only going to be utilized by super rich people, basically.
Sure.
I think it's fine to get rid of stuff like that and like direct avenues of basically like you and I both know that the line between a PAC and a campaign is superficial at best,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And politicians. And it was obvious then, and it's obvious now, and we all knew this is how it was going to shake out. And Supreme Court didn't give a shit because they owe their donors lots of favors. They want to receive more made up fake awards. But fuck, I distracted myself.
It was talking about we can't regulate content, but that was what its false comment was too. Yeah, you're right. We can regulate some content, but it's limited. So
yeah, in certain ways we can limit certain content, right? Like you had the old the FCC used to regulate, but you've probably heard of fairness doctrine. It's a little less applicable now, and they got rid of it. But
the reason
case on it.
The reason the fairness I think the fairness doctrine should come back, and it should be specifically related to news media organizations, regardless.
Yeah.
But the only reason it was legally allowed to exist is because it was using the public airways.
Yes, that is the distinction.
And now that we have
the
private
principle
cable
there.
Lines,
Yeah. Yeah. That is the distinction.
The principle is why we wanted it, but because of the fact that we have private cable lines now. Even though they're not really private, they're a lot funded by the government. But because of that existence, then you can't then legally, according to the Supreme Court, and this is, I think, them being stupid or not caring about poor people again. I think that's the problem there. I think you have the fairness doctrine come back, but then again, Hannity followed the fairness doctrine when it was Hannity and Combs.
Mm-hmm.
It was bullshit. but they were keeping to it because
Yeah.
they were still operating under that oh shit, I'm lost for words right now. But there were
It's the fair, like a fair equal like time to opposing interests or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, and I do see that problem. Like that would obviously be, I would never get past the Supreme Court because give them any reason to tell you why you can't regulate right wing ghouls, and they'll take it because their interest is in not regulating right wing ghouls. That's their interest. Anything else is
Supreme Court right now. Yeah.
This Supreme Court is incredibly broken. You know about the Federalist Society, right?
Yeah, I know about all this, brother.
Yeah.
Keep hearing. So.
Yeah, like this 40-year, 50-year political project to corrupt our courts and make them completely beholden. You know about the Powell memo too?
The what?
Powell memo?
No.
Powell memo was fun. You know, I look at it as like there's that famous line from that Republican strategist who's just like, the N-word quote. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, Atwater.
Yeah, the Lee Atwater quote, right? This is like the judicial version of that, where Lewis Powell published a memo who ended up being a Supreme Court, or I think he did while he was Supreme Court justice, telling like moneyed interests, like, listen, we need to like pool our money to fight these liberal douchebags and use our money to like exert our influence because they keep eroding it. And then after that is what precipitated for like using all this money in ways to fund these stupid think tanks and all this other nonsense.
I'll
send it to you. It's interesting to look at.
Yeah, the right wing is more effective at this, and it's either because they're craven and only care about power, or liberals and lefties are stupid. I don't know.
It's both,
and
definitely both,
and care more about being righteous than winning. And so, yeah, I don't know what we can do, but I feel like we approached the impasse though that I knew that we were going to approach here.
And what's the impasse?
So the impasse is that you want to be able to regulate content more than I would like to be able to regulate it. But we both agree that under the current definition of the First Amendment, even minus Citizens United, that it wouldn't be very effective.
Well, yeah, but that's not where my issue. So sorry, when I'm talking about like Citizens United, I could talk about how in my perfect world, I think regulating content is fucking fine. I'd like not to have to, but I live in a world with a bunch of idiots, and we're all idiots. I'm an idiot included. Okay, so we need to prevent me from seeing all these Big Mac commercials that make me fat and out of shape. So I acknowledge that as running into constitutional problems. What I'm telling you is that Citizens United, as long as you're not regulating content, but you're regulating how people can use their money to do things, I think you're fine.
Okay.
So what was your issue with that? Because you were trying to explain that to me, and I think I got distracted by something you said, or I construed something you said.
Was this on Twitter?
No, this was just now. Where I was like, wait, you said there's no difference between tax spending and yeah.
In terms of real world impact, there isn't much of a difference, except the difference being you can obfuscate. I can't pronounce that word. Obfuscate it to the point where people are like, oh, it's not that corrupting. Like, I think that's the only difference between the two.
Yeah, but when we're talking about donations to a political candidate or whatever, where you're limited to 2,600, your influence is limited to that 2,600. Now, obviously, I said I would support publicly financed elections, so I don't even want that. But I don't like the idea of my politicians having to worry about, appealing to the, even the upper middle class people who can give them $1,000, $2,000 donation. I don't even like that necessarily, because that's where you end up with like weird zoning shit or whatever. But I would take that over what we're dealing with now with these like abstracted like moneyed interests using like all these weird front organizations so that they can't be held accountable for like the clear shit that they're actually supporting, because what they're supporting is so utterly abhorrent. And like not popular, like not like what is it, 80-90% of Americans or something don't support the Citizens United decision. They think it was like wrong, that like rich people shouldn't have more of a say. But they're able to still
but then you can get that number to come down when you talk about the fact that legally speaking, that if we get rid of Citizens United, then it might actually impact the ability to create citizens groups.
Well, people are stupid, right? So depending on how you poll a question, you can get any fucking answer you want, right? You can caveat as much as you want. You can bring the number down quite a lot. I think that's kind of true. It's usually right enough,
Well, no, I'm saying like if it's not handled in a good way, that would be true though. That retort.
I don't think there's any. Sorry, maybe I'm not understanding what you're saying. I'm gonna say I don't think it's there's any.
So Citizens United allows anybody to form form groups and have unlimited money into those groups for social and political ends.
It goes back to my the law both equally prohibits the rich and the poor man from sleeping under a bridge.
But if it's not done in a good way, then you would limit it. You would end up by limiting the rich person from doing it. You would also limit the other people from being able to form these groups if it's not done in a good way.
Yeah. Well,
so it has to be done in a good way. So that's where the rub comes in, and that's
I think the good way could just be saying you can't do it, right? But when we go back to the distinction between citizens
okay,
groups,
so my HOA,
donations.
say that my HOA becomes political for whatever fucking reason. Maybe I take it over and I'd make it into a political organization where we're trying to fight homelessness by actually buying houses from the area and from people and kicking them out because of their whatever, right? Say I'm doing this fucking crazy lefty thing, but capitalism. Like, what's the difference between me doing that and a rich person doing something similar? Besides the fact that they have more funds to do it or more resources. That's what I'm saying. You have to operate within this realm where you make sure that you're only impacting the rich person's ability to do it, or limiting their influence of doing it.
Well, so let's say I limit both people to, I don't know, let's say 100 hours a week, 100 hours during an election cycle or whatever in effort of direct campaigning, and $3,000 of direct capital, right? Like I could do that, and that's a restriction applied to everyone neutrally. But realistically, I was going to invest any more than $3,000 to this campaign? Probably not. Like if I'm like me making like 40, 50, 60,000 a year or whatever, how much of my own personal money am I going to invest? Like time is more valuable to me. With rich people, the problem is they have money and they don't have time. That's why someone like Destiny or whatever can get a whole bunch of loser gamer bros to go campaign for a Senate race in Georgia, which is awesome because rich people, like, as much as they want, they can buy that to an extent, but having a whole bunch of pros just want to go out and knock on doors is a great thing. But in lieu of that, they'll just be like, well, I could just dump $1 million into advertising against the thing I don't like. And that's what they prefer to do because that's what they have. You use the tools you have, right? And the tools that we have as the average citizen are not, unlimited sums of money, but our feet, and our voices and our individual actions that we can do to contribute to stuff. And I think anything we do that limits the money and values the time you put into something is always going to benefit the average person and the citizens more than it's going to benefit rich people.
So what you would do is you would limit the amount of money and not what money a group can raise, but how much a person could contribute to each of these kind of groups.
Yeah, if I really thought the distinction you're talking about would be problematic, that seems like an easy way to do it to me. Like you could talk about stuff like the what's the people who do the environmental causes, the Sierra Club or something like that.
There's a couple of Greenpeace.
I don't know. There's tons of shit, but like we see people who are just donating their time and are explicitly part of like these organizations with causes versus like, I don't know, it being abstracted in some way. I think it's easier to just be like, okay, you're a legitimate organization versus something I would call illegitimate, right? Or you can even do the smell test shit, right? Where you implement some general rules about like, oh, you need to have like a bona fide grassroots organization versus an AstroTurf organization, right? And then, you have like the FEC, whose job it is to distinguish between these two groups, which in the case of Citizens United, that case went there because I would say they did, right? They had this one guy who was clearly a political actor, and they're like, fuck you. You can't do that because you're a political actor. You need to operate within the normal window. And they were able to draw that line. So, I mean, like we have people who are capable with brains who have the correct education and background to make these decisions. Is it going to be fair? Are you going to have people whining? Yeah, sure. Is it going to be right all the time? No, but it just needs to be better. It doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah, I think potentially going back to a limit on individual contributions to things might work. I just don't think it'll pass the smell test long term. I think
the Supreme Court's going to become a problem for sure.
Or like Citizens United people will end up agreeing Citizens United was ruled mostly properly, except whatever reason it is, and you just won't have it. What you're saying.
Sorry, say that one more time.
So either it will be circumvented, rich people will circumvent it in some way. I don't know. Hire 100 people to give them $1,000 each to go donate to a thing or whatever, right? Or you would go up against the Supreme Court. So that's if the Supreme Court's like, yeah, you know what, we're going to limit money in politics in this way now. Or you would get the Supreme Court saying that no, that's still anti-free speech, and citizens also saying, yeah, that's not really cool. Because of the limitations that puts on other people doing things, not just rich people.
Yeah. Hold on. I lost the thread for a second. Yeah, I don't know. The thing is, like, I try not to historicize it too much. I figure this is mostly going to be like some philosophy with like a small amount of history. But like we can look at like the clear way that the money has increased over time. Just say like there was no difference before Citizens United and after Citizens United. We can see the amount of outside spending that has just increased dramatically, and the effects it had on our elections. I think there was. I actually just heard about this in the book I was just reading too. So I was aware of this beforehand. I'm not just all basing it off of one book, just to clarify. But this was like an interesting, more deep dive from an investigative journalist into it. And one thing she was talking about is how how you could like pretty much directly, there's studies that basically directly tie like the radicalization of our politics to this. Like for anyone who isn't more politically aware, after Obama won in 2008, there's basically this idea that like, oh my God, like you're going to have like a New Deal style coalition that's going to be like a dominance of Democrats until the Republican Party forms something more reasonable, right? But then from Citizens United and, various other decisions they made, it made the Republican Party able to use their money that they always have more of to monumentally transform or radically transform our political system, which they did. Because no one thought they were going to win in 2010 or 2012, and they not only won, they blew it out.
The only counter I'd have to that is that I think it was obfuscated more, and it's just more in the open. I think the amount of money slushing around for political causes due to funding research and think tanks and everything like that, I think that was always a large amount of money that was hidden from like more hidden. And now it's not, it's less hidden because it's more in your face because people are just buying ads.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. If there were studies that say like, here's difference A to B from before Citizens United, after Citizens United, showing a radical shift in money spent, you would think like, well, that money was probably being spent anyway, or
no, it's not that the money was being spent anyways. I think that the money was shifted from think tanks, research projects, hiring people, etc., into like those kind of like news media organizations or what have you. And I think it was more geared towards political ads, focus groups, and stuff like that. I think the money that was once in the background where people are like, oh, maybe, yeah, you know what, Cato Institute exists, that's fine. And now it's more kind of, I think some of that money is, more in the open. The money was sloshing around in the background, like I said, Numbers USA and stuff like that. Like I don't, do you know of a new think tank that was started recently? I don't.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, offhand, I don't know.
Yeah, I can't think of one.
Yeah, I can't think of any offhand, but I'm sure there's like a list somewhere of new.
Right.
New
I mean, we'll have to go look it up, but I do think we're at this. We agree a lot. There's some things that we disagree on. Been streaming for about an hour and 22 minutes. So do you want to like just take some audience questions and then call it rip? All right. So there was one that came in from Ecstasy, and it says, how does one come to the conclusion that the Supreme Court is coming to decisions based on left or right leaning tendencies? They followed that up with, I just don't see how the decisions they are making are based on anything more than seeing if laws or rulings that are passed concur to the limitations set by the Constitution. Its job isn't to decide whether or not a law is positive or negative, but people spin every decision from the court outside into an argument as to why we should or shouldn't like the decision, how corrupt it is if it doesn't go the way that was wanted, but rather than as an opportunity to use political capital to pass new legislation, etc. So I think you're going to be a good person to address that, and then I'll address it after.
Sure. So there's like a few ways you can look at this, right? So you have how clearly political that the Supreme Court has become. I think most people kind of woke up, probably mostly for the Merrick Garland thing, where Republicans refused to have a hearing on Merrick Garland, and then they rushed through Amy Coney Barrett years later. You have the need for the Harry Reid in 2013, I think, to use the nuclear option, which allowed them to confirm federal judges that Republicans were stonewalling and not allowing to be heard at all. And the reason for this was because the Republicans have had like this idea that the liberals controlled the court in like the 70s. They had a whole bunch of rulings they didn't particularly like. Oddly enough, abortion wasn't really one of them at the time. They were really annoyed about like Brown v. Board of Education, the ones that let people Miranda rights and all this stuff, right? And people generally, it's funny because when they talk about it, they can only talk abstractly about an activist court, because when they get into the specifics they have issues with, people are like, wait, hold on, I like these things. But anyway, so there's a conservative political movement designed or specifically done with like the Federalist Society to get judges who have a specific predisposition towards like conservative ideas. And you can see this in how judges are selected, right? Trump specifically said, I'll only take judges from the Federalist Society. They will tell me who I'm going to put. So the person choosing our Supreme Court nominees was not Donald J. Trump, elected president. It was Leonard Leo, some asshole at the Federalist Society, who no one probably knew his name until I said it just now. You probably do, but many people probably don't know who Leonard Leo is. But hey, he's the one who chose the last 3 Supreme Court justices. All right, or had a large say in that, along with a large parts of our federal judiciary. So far as like judges are political, you'll have people who get their judicial philosophies that map onto political ideologies, right? Whether I say I'm an originalist or like a constitutional realist or something like that, like these things specifically align with one thing or the other that leads you to making certain decisions. There are non-issues where they'll have 9-0 decisions, but when you have more contentious issues, they're always going to break down among some partisan divide in one way or another. And those map onto political realities. Sorry, that was a little rambly, but.
No, and I'll follow up with that. I think you can also look at just how a person you can extract a person's worldviews based on their writings and their legal opinions and things like that. And when you have an abortion is one of the key ones here in the Constitution, there isn't any mention of abortion, yet people are like, well, you have the right to life, but nobody actually understands when life actually begins, and that becomes a philosophical question. And when you boil down the arguments against abortion, it usually, not 100%, but like 90% of the time, comes down to a religious argument. And even from a like atheist perspective, it's like life is sacred, ergo, you need to have life is sacred. And I think it was Hitchens that said life is sacred and they're going to be future citizens. So I have a right to say that you can't kill future citizens. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty conservative, dude. Whatever. So I think, yeah. So I think that you can have these kind of things where you can look at someone's decision making and actually say, okay, this was like their worldview is X, and that led them to interpret the law as Y. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think the courts are and have been largely political since their entire existence. Marbury versus Madison was a political decision for the courts in order to have some sort of modicum of power. And it's been that way ever since. The difference being is that we're more bifurcated now than we have been in the last 60 years when it comes to, or not 60 years, we'll say 50 years than we have been in the last 50 years. I think that partisanship, there's less overlap between Republicans and Democrats among a worldview than there was 50 years ago. And so I think that's where you're seeing more of this from. There was more consensus back in the day, and there's less of it now.
I think abortion is probably one of the few issues where you could like pinpoint down that like there's a clear like moral distinction here versus a factual disagreement between conservatives and liberals or whatever. That's probably one of the few you can. But besides that, I think it's mostly people operating off of like propaganda bullshit instead of having differing worldviews, which is unfortunate.
Okay, we had another question or kind of a comment from your Environmental Seattle. Said, if you look at U.S. patent offices, I have some doubts over a new bureaucracy solving any sort of problem. And so this was to your statement about having some sort of government agency that will be able to determine like what is and is not factual or what have you. And the patent office, what he's saying is that context, a government board to review the truth, which is always in question. And then patents is one of those situations where you're like, well, who actually created the thing first? Well, so
So to address that like a little bit, like we already have organizations designed to tell you the truth, right? Like we have the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, who's going to tell you if a given drug is efficacious or not for approval. They tell you like what's in a given food, and they punish people for lying about contents of food, right? If you say your thing is 100% beef, and then it turns out it's like 80% pork or something, you're going to get in a lot of fucking trouble. This goes for a whole lot of other things in life that we trust the government to regulate. They do a decent job at doing, like what's inside the sausage. We now know what's inside the sausage because in like the 30s or 40s, we developed, I think it was the FDA was around then or whatever, to regulate what we're actually consuming and ensuring honesty. You know, my biggest concern would be like Republicans hijacking. But there's ways you can structure things so that hopefully you would limit that ability. What is it? The thing that Elizabeth Warren set up before she was in the Senate. You know what I'm talking about?
CFPB.
Yeah, CFPB, right?
Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Yeah,
CFPB.
So that was structured in such a way to try and limit like outside political influence. And there's ways you could do that. The Supreme Court, of course, struck down some of those things to it because they suck. But I mean, it is what it is.
Right. Okay. Do we have any other questions from the audience? If not, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. We got a new message. Thumbs up from your environmental Seattle. XZ had said that to follow up on the thing that you had answered for him. I feel people say that because when they make a decision, inevitably they use the outside information to fill the gaps of the decision made rather than the facts of the case and the principles that constitute merit on the law passing or not.
Okay, so I want to add to that my rambling answer like a little bit. So I think when you look at the specifics, it's easy for them to bullshit you on what's happening. And if you just try and look at it, you hear what they're saying, you're like, okay, I can see that even if I don't agree with it, right? And it's only when you really step back and you look at like how these people end up on the Supreme Court, the general politics around it, that you can see the clear political influence on what they're doing, right? Their writing is designed to abstract your ability to see the clear political influence of what they're doing, right? There's a reason why when they tried nominating I think it was Judge M. Gonzalez to the Supreme Court in 2004, they said that's Mexican for Souter, because conservatives were fucking right mad that David Souter, who was supposed to be a solid liberal vote, ended up a solid conservative vote, ended up shifting more and more liberal over time. So you had that nice little racist ad that Souter is, I think, Spanish or Mexican for, Gonzalez is Spanish or Mexican for Souter, right? They're very, very explicitly politically engaged. So that's the one. The top level remove some of that. If you look at it from that lens, it's pretty easy. With their decisions, things are not usually, when you're dealing with Supreme Court shit, it's not usually that black or white, to be honest. It's not like, oh, this is clear or that's not clear, right? One of the things we were talking about in this is balancing tests. I think I talked about in the very beginning. Where you have to just make judgment calls. Or like you'll have a law or a statute that you're interpreting that's very vague. Like, what does it mean to be an undue burden? Well, that's subjective. There's no hard line here, you know? There's a Supreme Court case not too long ago. I think it was about the EPA. They gutted like the EPA's right to like, regulate like some sort of emissions, basically. And they said the text of the law was just like they can do what they think is appropriate or something. And the Supreme Court's like, well, it wasn't appropriate for you to evaluate financial costs over impact at the stage you did, right? Which is totally ludicrous. Like if the FDA, if the EPA is regulating and determining a cost analysis at this stage of it instead of the first stage of it, whether determining it's a problem, that's so irrelevant. But they were acting like it was a hardline rule. But the reason they did that is because they were opposed to regulating these oil companies or the polluting companies. That's what their issue was. They're working backwards from their conclusion. If you want to find legalese to do that, you can do it. If you want to overinterpret a broad language in a very narrow way, you can do that. And that's what's happening. Most laws are not that cut and dry, like what is free speech, what isn't free speech, or whatever. It's a lot more vague, and the people who act like it's hard lines, they're doing it to mask their actual reasoning. They want to be able to say, oh, my hands were tied, I had no choice, but the reality of the situation is they had a choice and they chose wrong. That's it.
Yeah, do we have any doesn't look like we have any more questions. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. If you liked this content and would like to see more, please check out the Crowdsource Politics News Roundup. It is every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was of the last week with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. We also do another podcast called Cypher State, which is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast tackling a big issue of a geopolitical nature that happened in the last month or so. Our last episode was called Taliban Land, which covered how the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan and what that means for the broader geopolitical situation since the pullout of American U.S. forces and allied forces from Afghanistan. And you can catch that on the third Sunday of every month, except on holidays. This month, we'll probably do that actually on the third Saturday during our charity stream. There will be a charity stream where I will be streaming for 12 to 18 hours happening on, let me double check the date. I think it's the 18th. Yep. Happening on Saturday, the 18th. So, a week and a half or so from today, where we'll get political talking heads across the political spectrum from both Twitch and YouTube in order to raise money for a good cause. That good cause will be doing something for refugees. We just don't have a firm hold on which organization we'll be raising money for. So stay tuned for that. Joe, why don't you go ahead and shout yourself out again, and then I'll call it a day.
Yeah, it's hard to find my YouTube channel. It doesn't show up when you search my name directly, but it's just GKR, 3 letters. It's GKR with 2 underscores on Twitter. Feel free to at me or yell at me about whatever you want. I will happily get on voice with you, or we can have pithy Twitter conversations too. So that's it. That's all I got.
All right. And I dropped the link in the chat. Should propagate here shortly. So again, everybody, thank you for coming. Join the Discord. You can hit me up also on Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll. I like to tweet memes and whatever the hell else I feel like getting involved in discourse here and there and what have you. And if you liked what you heard, because I know you did because you stayed with us now, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe on YouTube. It really does help us out. And as always, like we say at Crowdsource Politics, keep your head up through the political storm. Deuces.